The first thing I remember was the sound of the rain against the bedroom window. It was not a hard rain, just a steady tapping, soft enough that I could hear my wife breathing beside me, though she had turned her back toward the wall. I reached across the space between us and laid my hand near her shoulder. She pulled away so quickly that the mattress shifted beneath me. Then she said, very quietly, "Please do not." I took my hand back. I did not ask her why, not that night. But I lay awake until the rain stopped, wondering what had changed between us and why she would not let me close enough to understand it. My name is Jonas. I am a husband, a father, and the head of a household in an old order Amish community. I share these stories because people often see the outside of our lives and imagine that everything inside is simple. It is not. Marriage is work in any home, and silence can grow just as easily in a plain house as it can anywhere else. If you have ever loved someone who would not tell you what was wrong, I would be glad to hear how you handled it. At the time, my wife and I had been married for 14 years. We had 4 children under our roof. The oldest was 12, the youngest was 6. Our days were full before the sun came up. Cows to milk, bread to bake, lunches to pack, harness to check, wood to split, clothing to mend. There was always something calling for one of us. For most of those years, we had moved around each other with the ease that comes from long practice. She knew where I would leave my work coat. I knew how she liked the stove banked at night. She could tell by the way I set down my boots whether the day had gone well. I could hear from the kitchen whether she was humming because she was content or because she was trying not to worry. Then, over the course of a few weeks, something shifted. At first, it was small. She stopped sitting beside me after the children went to bed. Instead, she would find one more dish to wash or one more shirt to fold. If I entered the room, she would keep her eyes on her hands. At night, she would say she was tired and turn toward the wall. I told myself she was worn down. It was late autumn, and that season can take much from a household. The mornings were dark. The mud clung to everything. We had been helping a neighbor repair a damaged barn roof, and I was gone more than usual. She had carried the home without complaint many times before, so I tried to make things easier. I brought in extra wood before supper. I took the younger children with me to the shop on Saturday so she would have a quiet house. I repaired the loose hinge on the pantry door that had been bothering her for months. I did what men sometimes do when we do not understand a problem. We fix the things we can see, but the distance remained. One evening I came in after dark and found her standing alone at the kitchen table. There was only one lamp burning. Her hands were flat against the wood, and her head was bowed. I asked whether she was feeling ill. She said no. I asked whether I had offended her. She said no again. Then I asked whether she was angry with me. She looked up at that. Her eyes were red, though I had not heard her crying. She said, "It is not you, Jonas." That answer should have brought relief. It did not. There are times when the words, "It is not you," can make a man feel even more helpless, because they tell him the door is closed and he does not know what is behind it. I wanted to push harder. I wanted to demand an explanation. I was her husband. We had made promises before God and the church. I believed there should be no secrets between us. But I also knew the difference between leadership and force. A husband can ask for honesty. He cannot drag it out of someone and call that trust. So I said, "When you are ready, I am here." She nodded, but she did not speak. The next 2 weeks were the hardest. Nothing dramatic happened. That was part of the difficulty. We still ate together. We still prayed. We still corrected the children, carried water, swept floors, and visited family on Sunday. From the outside, our home looked the same. Inside, every quiet moment felt heavy. I began to wonder things I am not proud of. I wondered whether she had stopped loving me. I wondered whether there was something in me she had come to fear. I searched through old conversations, trying to find the place where I had failed to listen or had spoken too sharply. I remembered small arguments from years before and gave them more weight than they deserved. One night I went out to the workshop after everyone was asleep. The air smelled of pine shavings and cold iron. I sat on the bench without lighting the lantern. For nearly an hour I listened to the wind move against the boards. My father had once told me that a man can be wrong even when he has done nothing wrong. I had not understood him when I was young. That night I did. Sometimes the mistake is not in the deed. It is in believing everything is about you. The next morning was a Monday. There was frost along the fence rails, white and thin. My wife had been awake before me. When I came downstairs, she was seated at the kitchen table with a folded piece of paper in front of her. She did not look up when I entered. The children were still asleep. The house was silent except for the clock. She placed her hand over the paper and said, "I went to see the midwife last week." I remember the exact way she said it, not frightened, not calm, just careful. I sat across from her. Then she told me what she had been hiding. She had found a lump in her breast. She had noticed it while washing at the basin. At first she thought it would go away. When it did not, she went alone to speak with the midwife. The midwife had told her that it needed to be examined by a doctor in town. My wife had not told me because she was afraid, not only afraid of illness, afraid of what would happen to the children if she became weak, afraid of the cost, afraid that I would look at her differently, afraid that once she said the words aloud, they would become real. And she had pulled away from my touch because she could not bear for my hand to come near the place where she believed something terrible might be growing. For a few seconds I could not speak. The room seemed smaller than it had before. I looked at the folded paper beneath her hand and understood that it held the address and time of an appointment. Then she began to cry. My wife is not a woman who cries easily. She has delivered children, buried a parent, and stood beside me through poor harvests without making a display of pain. But that morning the tears came all at once. I moved my chair closer, slowly enough that she could stop me if she wished. I did not reach for her until she lifted her hand from the paper and placed it in mine. She said, "I did not want you to be afraid too." I answered, "You do not have to carry fear alone to protect me." That was the only sentence I knew to say. We went to town 2 days later. A neighbor drove us. The road was rough from frozen ruts, and the wheels struck each one hard enough to shake the bench beneath us. My wife kept both hands folded in her lap. I kept mine beside hers, close but not touching, until she turned her palm upward. The doctor examined her and arranged further tests. We waited 12 days for an answer. 12 days can be a long time. During that time, we told no one except my brother, who helped with chores, and one older woman from the community who stayed with the children. We did not want the children frightened before we knew what we were facing. At night, my wife still turned toward the wall sometimes, but now I understood. I did not take it as rejection. I would sit beside her and read quietly from the Psalms, or I would say nothing at all. There is a kind of closeness that does not ask to be touched. I had not known that before. When the results finally came, the lump was not cancer. It was a benign cyst. The doctor said it should be monitored, but he did not believe it was dangerous. I expected relief to feel joyful. Instead, it felt like my knees had stopped holding me. I sat in the wagon outside the office and covered my face with both hands. My wife leaned against my shoulder for the first time in nearly a month. We rode home under a pale winter sky. The fields looked empty and hard, but I had never been so grateful to see them. The danger had passed, but the lesson did not. For a while, I had believed my wife's distance was about me. I had measured her silence by what it took away from me: affection, reassurance, certainty. I had not understood that she was trying to survive a fear she could not yet name. That does not mean secrecy is good. I told her later that I wished she had trusted me sooner. She said she wished that too. We both had something to learn. She had to learn that protecting the family did not mean standing alone. I had to learn that loving someone does not always mean demanding immediate access to everything they feel. Marriage does not give a husband ownership over his wife's body, her fear, or the pace at which she finds words. It gives him a duty to be safe enough for the truth when it comes. That is what I understand now. There are moments when a man must step forward and lead. There are other moments when the strongest thing he can do is sit still, keep the lamp burning, and leave the door open. My wife and I still speak about that season from time to time. Not often, we do not need to. But when she grows quiet now, I do not begin by asking what I have done wrong. I begin by asking whether she is carrying something alone. Most times the answer is no. Sometimes the answer is yes. And when it is yes, I listen. If you value honest stories about marriage, family, faith, and the parts of Amish life that are not visible from the road, you can subscribe and join me here each week. And I would like to ask you something. When someone you love pulls away, do you move closer, give them space, or try to do both?